Welcome again, and this is Trader Horn at your service. We are on the second segment of our two-part series on how to buy you REITs, ACs, more efficiently. I hope you learn from this just as you learned from the first one. Moving on to the second method. The table here shows you a DCA method in buying Ayala REIT since its IPO in 2020. If for some reason mayroong investor na nag-DCA ito who then invested 5,000 pesos at the opening price at the end of each trading month for almost 4 years, your average is roughly the same as my computation, which is at 34.55. As of end June 2024, the closing price of a REIT is 34.50. So halos break-even lang. Since IPO, a REIT gained 28%. But you only get that kind of gain if you bought only once during the IPO and did nothing and just collected those cash dividends over that span of period. The PSEI here rose 5% over that same sketch. So your 5,000 pesos monthly investment in a REIT, in total, for those almost 4 years, you have bought a total of 235,000 pesos from your savings. And that amount translates to about 6,800 shares of a REIT. And in those almost 4 years, it generated 28,000 pesos in cash dividends. So that's 12%. So for computing the total return, so that's the price appreciation plus the dividends received. So the price appreciation is break even, and then you got some 12% on those cash dividends. But that's for 4 years. So per year, that's a little over 3%. And if you factor in the inflation rate we mentioned earlier, the midpoint is 3%. So halos break even then, right? One of the key features of the REIT law is the ability to swap assets from the sponsor company to the REIT company at practically zero cost. The transfer is in effect a sale from one company to the other company owned by the same set of controlling shareholders. And for a REIT, it plans to grow and increase its assets under management year after year. So you would notice po that every year may milalagay pong malls or offices si Ayala Land, transferring it to Ayala REIT. There's nothing really wrong about it. No, but what is little talked about is the concept of ownership dilution. And I will explain this concept as simple as I can. Let me explain the concept of ownership dilution. Madali lang po ito maintindihan. Imagine you are an owner of a 10 million company. You share this with a sponsor partner. So palahati kayo, tig 50-50 kayo. So let's say the 10 million company has 10 million shares valued at 1 peso each per share. So tig 5 million shares kayo. Now, personally, this sponsor company na partner mo, you agree that he will infuse an asset worth 5 million pesos. So now, your company will now be valued at 15 million pesos. So binenta niya dun yung asset niya. Kin-transfer niya. So babayaran siya personally dun sa asset na nilagay niya, right? So yung company niyo ngayon is worth 15 million, but the shares is still 10 million. So para mabayaran siya, your company, which you own initially 50-50, will now issue 5 million shares. Kasi 5 million pesos yung in-inject niya, right? So he will now own, your partner will now own 10 million shares of now 50 million shares. And you, on the other hand, you did nothing. You still kept your 5 million shares. So that now translates reduced ownership of from 50% down to 1/3. Your partner, on the other hand, his ownership goes up from 50% to 66.7%. 2/3 na siya ngayon. because he injected that asset. So, yung ownership mo ngayon is now reduced or diluted to a smaller percentage. So now we know the concept of ownership dilution. The goal is to beat the effects of dilution in your portfolio of REIT stocks so you can maintain your proportionate share in the companies that you own. Does that make sense? Because a simple peso cost averaging does not take this into account. In a way, you are still passively investing because you know what stock you want to buy and you will buy progressively as you go along, but you are now more conscientious of the timing of your purchase because you will align it with the announcement of the share swap. So let me highlight this. Since a REIT IPO'd in 2020, the assets under management has grown almost 4 times from 30 billion pesos to now 117 billion pesos. So in that span of period, a REIT had announced 4 share swaps practically every year since the IPO. It announced a share swap transaction with Ayala Land. No? So in 2021, Ayala Land transferred some 15.5 billion pesos worth of assets. In 2022, some 11.3 billion. In 2023, 22.5 billion. And just this year, about 28.6 billion, its largest asset infusion into a REIT. In the announcement of those asset swaps, there are two things that are disclosed prominently. The value of the assets that will be infused into a REIT and the share swap price at which the transaction will be consummated. So usually the price that they will be declaring is higher, or there's a premium involved compared to the VWAP of the prior week or so. It is usually announced. But the extent of dilution or the number of shares that will be issued few months down the road is not disclosed. But we can calculate based on the 2 figures that are disclosed. No? So the value of or the size of the infusion and the swap price. Now, so for the 2021 swap at 32 pesos, the dilution is about 44%. In the 2022 asset infusion, the swap price is at 44.80 with a corresponding dilution of about 16%. For 2023, the swap price is at 37 and the value of the infusion is 22.5 billion. That's a dilution of 33%. And the last one that was announced last March is valued at 28.6 billion with a share swap price of 34. The dilution on that, although the shares hasn't been issued yet, is about 35%. So knowing what we know of the methodology here, we take that into practice. Let's say a REIT will just be doing its IPO. And we know that over time, a REIT will be infusing more assets. That is a given. So from let's say an initial 20,000 peso investment, you buy at the IPO price. And then a year after, a REIT announces an asset infusion, we buy there. We buy or we increase our position by 44%, the amount of dilution for the 2021 asset infusion. The following year, it infuses again a new set of assets, and the dilution is 16%. So we increase our position by 16%. So from 20,000, we increase that to 29,000 pesos, and then by 2022, we're now up to 34,000. By 2023, with the asset infusion again of some 22.5 billion, it increased the dilution by 33%. So we also increased our position by 33%. So from 34,000, we increased our position to 44,000 pesos. And for this year, the announcement of the share swap at 34 pesos, we know that a REIT will be diluted by 35%. So we increase again our position, but by that same amount or by that same degree, bringing us to a position size of 60,000 pesos, or roughly 453 shares. So for those who do not yet have a position in a REIT, you know that your buying price should be below the 34 pesos per share, or you want to use the methodology we used earlier, the method 1 on buying on the yields, where our yield target is at 7.85%. The buying price there is 30.50. So either way, you're buying below the swap price. So you can start your position there, and perhaps next year, a REIT will disclose again another round of asset infusion. So you increase now your position based on the projected or the expected dilution by then. In conclusion, if you adopted this strategy since IPO, your average cost was lower by 7%, while the return on the dividends received was 17% higher compared if you just adopted the typical peso cost averaging. Isn't that simply better? Walang benefit ang hindsight dito. We acted as if it was real time. There was an instance that the buying was even higher immediately after the disclosure. But with the benefit of looking at historical performance and knowing the asset swap price and buying below that, we can infer that the returns could have been improved. But of course, as we know it, hindsight is 2020. This concludes our long pilot episode, and hopefully you learned something new here. You can freely test this out with other REITs out there, and perhaps use this also in the upcoming REIT IPO of SM Prime, perhaps later in the year or next year. As you know, they will be initially infusing some assets, and then down the road, they will inject also other malls in the process. Thank you. I hope this video helps you in your journey to financial freedom. Comment down below your thoughts and reactions. I get ideas from your feedback. Click like if you enjoy the video or learn something new. Please share this video with your loved ones and investing friends. Subscribe if you're interested to learn more. Again, this is Trader One, and I will see you in the next one.